Look, I had something very disturbing that I was just thinking I've never thought of before. It's about my mother, my deceased sister, my mom's deceased daughter. Talked about this girl Ivan took care of, Down syndrome. I watched my sister's lifeless body hanging over as she was trying to be walked by Ivan. Y'all know the story, so she was able to have access to these videos. This is the first time I've ever, someone may have picked up else on it because I think I've shared this information before, but I didn't think about it because I think when I shared this information, I didn't know about my dead sister, or that she had died, and that was my sister, who had Down syndrome, a very sick little girl that wore the princess outfit. And this is why I wasn't able to put it together. My mother used to tell me when I was a kid growing up, we had problems with roaches every once in a while, but it wasn't until I was 18 that we showed up back to the house, and after renting it out, and the roaches were everywhere. It was horrific. I've never seen so many roaches. I couldn't believe what the people had done. They ruined the house. We've never had that many roaches. I literally opened the cabinets and roaches literally were falling to the fucking ground. Like 10 of them. And there were shelves, and there was like another 30 to 25 roaches with eggs on each shelf. And there were about the width about this window, and about as tall as that window to the very floor. But I remember opening it, and all these roaches just started falling to the ground. I was like, "What the fuck?" And I jumped up, and I was like, "What the fuck are they?" And it was out of like a scary movie. I don't know who lived there prior and how bad they trashed it. Maybe they did it on purpose. Maybe professionals that did that. Anyway, we were there at the house. When I was growing up, there's not cameras for this. When I was growing up, I think I was probably around, I don't know, maybe I was over 10 years old. I was over 10 years old when my mom started using some sort of poison that smelled like a really thick aroma of broccoli. And I used to, or at least that's what I remember thinking. I was like, why does it smell like broccoli? It sounds like a really condensed smell of broccoli. That's what it smelled like to me. Or at least that's what I thought it smelled like. And it worked. My mother used it, and it always worked really well. And she said that it was a certain type of smell. This is really disturbing. This is very disturbing. This is why I believe that I should have been able to speak up. I should have been told this information, but they sabotaged everything, and now they're throwing the dead little girl at me as a weapon. That's what Sarah and Ken are doing with Kenneth and the platoon of this whole race war for the president. Because her worthless dead body is now being regenerated to be thrown at me for the profitable gain. And I know this sounds horrific to talk about a dead little girl that wore a princess because it sounds like a horror movie, but that's exactly what's happening. There was a better way to deal with this, and they didn't. This was all out of selfish and greed and how stupid my mother is. Period. This is how you get rid of human life. Give it to Madison. Give it to Kenneth. Forgiveness in the Bible? Oh, it's never racist. Oh, remember? Who's smarter? Who's smarter? Who's smarter? You're outnumbered. You're outnumbered. And it's fucking thrown in for me, it's thrown in the fucking towel. It's fucking the little white flag surrender. Because, look, my mother would say, is the one that told me it was her. And yeah, it was her. I'm like 90% it was her. Yeah, she was the only one, because I never had conversations about cockroaches with anyone. Like, if anything, I may have said, oh, my mom uses some stuff. It smells like broccoli. I don't know what kind of stuff it is, but it worked really great. And it really did. It worked. It literally cleared out our whole house. It was completely. We had like a little small minor roast infested in our kitchen, It was only in our kitchen that we had this problem with, and it worked. It literally, there was not a single roach that we saw. It worked. I don't know what chemicals it was. I don't know if it was a white powder or a gel, or I don't know, but I just know that I remember never seeing any type of traps. I don't think I remember seeing anything. If anything, it may have been a white powder, maybe, but I don't remember seeing anything. I really do not remember seeing anything that it really indicated of a smell. And I thought it was like, I was assuming that it was probably just like a container you open up, and it just, because it was a very powerful smell. It just made the whole house smell, especially the kitchen. And it was a pretty thick aroma. It wasn't heavy in the air, like weight to it, but it was a very dense smell, pretty dense smell. It wasn't uncomfortable to smell necessarily, but it wasn't a very good smell, but it wasn't a nasty smell. It was just it was a funky smell. It was a funky smell, is the only way I could express it. But it worked, cleared all the roaches. But my mother's the only one, and I know she was the one. She told me this, and she said, "This is, you don't have to believe me. And this is how bad it's going to get about my dead sister being related to cockroaches." My mother told me, and she was putting the poison in our kitchen, and she would do this. And I would be talking to her, and she says, "Oh, sí le ponía because huele de la panza." Si se huelen y que se van. So my mother is saying that the roaches smell through their stomach, and she points at her stomach, "Y sí que se van, yeah, sí que se van." Now, I think it's important. Now, the first time she uses chemical, I think, I don't know if it was right after my dad's suicide. So this is why the conversation leads. To, she could have been talking about my dad, sí que se van, because she wants to be nurturing to me as a kid, because she knows or believes that she understands better. And the way to move on in life is to sort of just say that to me so that we move forward in life. We move forward. But this is how my mother relates to it. She says, "Oh, sí, le pongo un sonido y sí, que si está bueno que se van. Ellos huelen del estómago." She said that the cockroaches, they smell through their stomach, through their underbelly, that they smell like that. And my mother never said antennas. She never said that. It was my mother that said that she says that they smell through their stomach, and that the reason, she said in Spanish, "Si lo pongo ese el huele del estómago y luego se van." But her reaction or her posture, I'm leading now to, she's talking about my dead sister. I know she loves her sister, her daughter, but she's saying, and she's relating that because she's not taking care of the kid. She's being trained to not like the kid. She's want to feel compassion, but she has to act in the reality of the circumstances. Who knows if she poisoned herself or tried to commit suicide that caused that child to end up very deformed and mentally handicapped. And I think it's important for me to talk about, because I don't know. My mother could have taken an overdose of pills, which I do think, my mother went to Green Oaks before. She went to Green Oaks, and I remember that once when I was a kid. And I don't know if there's record proof of this, I hope there is, but I remember my dad and my mom coming home, and my mom was in her you know when you go to Grandy's? You know when you go to Grandy's and they wear those aprons, outfits? That's how my mother was dressed. That's what I remember her coming home in. And I remember my father said, yeah, she had to go to Green Oaks. And I don't know my mother if I ever said that she tried committing suicide, she tried taking some pills. But if she did, which I think there is a good chance, I mean, there's no way to prove it, unless you got the records or my mother confessed to it many years ago. I don't know. But I remember she was I was a very young infant. I was like 4 or 5 years old when this happened. Not even 4. This is before Michael Jackson. I was about 3 to 4 years old because I was still learning to walk around and function throughout the house, and at 3 years old. But I wanted to say this because I'm 100%, now there may be cameras or recording devices in our house that can provide this proof. The only thing that made me just now think about it is when these guys came over to see if there's to put traps all in here in my apartment, and then to do a pest control of roaches or insects to make sure that the house is fine. And I said there was a roach over there and there's a baby roach over there too. Anyway, so I wanted to talk about this. This is very disturbing to me. This is very earth-shaking to me because my mother is relating the way that she's pushing away this dead little girl is by relating the cockroach poison. Now, she might be saying that because she knew instinctively that she tried committing suicide and she damaged the child's brain that caused this child to be deformed. Maybe that's why I wasn't deformed, because maybe the child wasn't born this way. Maybe this happened only because she ingested a type of poison, or she did this to herself. Maybe someone beat her up. Where did this child come from? Maybe someone punched her. Maybe someone punched her in her stomach and hit the baby's brain and caused her to give birth or did damage to the brain. It's a mystery. For the first 10 years of this little girl's life, I was 7 years old when Ivan moved in. I was 7 years old. I was in second grade. And I was 5 in first grade, had a fail 6, I was 7 years old. 7 to just turning 8 years old. Or late 7 years old when Ivan moved into that house. That little girl was 3 to 4 years old. She was 18 months older than me. So this little girl is 18 months older than me. That means that for the first 9 years of this little girl's life, I have no idea where she was raised. For the first 9 years of this little girl, I have no idea where she lived, where she came from. I don't even have any idea. I have no idea. I'm totally blind to this too. Was she in an orphanage? Was she found in a trash can? Was she found in an was she found in somebody's, did somebody steal the baby and they didn't want it, and then they threw it in a trash can, and then somebody found it, and then they found out what this baby's child name was, or DNA, and they found out it was connected to my mother? I have no idea, no earthly idea. All I know is that this girl came out of nowhere at 9 years old, and she just shows up to our neighbor's house. I have no idea to this day. There's not even a fickle of an idea to even where this kid came from. Well, I want to say this. There's no way to prove it. This makes me very dangerous about my mother. Now, even more dangerous about my mother's twin. This is why this is very uncomfortable for me. My mother said that. She said this in Spanish. She said, this is exactly how she did it. Okay, I'm going to come as close as out of the way that she expressed it. She's like doing this. Le ponía ponzoña para hacer, se van, sí, huele muy feo y la panza y es que se van. And she said this more than once. And I remember one time she said this. I want to say she's sitting on the couch and she said this. And this is what she does. She said, I said, hey mom, did you put el porcino de los cucarachas para los cucarachas? Esa cosa que tú usas trabaja muy bueno. And this is what I said. And she said, she's sitting on the couch kind of like this. And she goes, sí, le comí el ponzone que se van. And she stays like this sitting on the couch. She said this when we were in the living room. She's practicing to get rid of the dead body. I know somebody's carrying the luggage. I know that's his. Is getting rid of it. She's practicing to get rid of the cockroaches. The leftover good, the leftover little retard that nobody wants. The little human body that causes problems. Is not really benefiting or doing anything. This is what happens. But I don't think necessarily that she doesn't want to. She has to, because she's sitting on the couch and she shows some kind of expression on her face that is uncomfortable, and she's facing toward Yvonne, and she has a crucifix right above our door. But she's sitting on watching the TV, and then I remember her going, "Yeah, I don't know. See, ya con me." So she feels uncomfortable about it. There's a consciousness of uncomfortable about how, but there's nothing that we can do. Remember how much money and who owns the money. So I wanted to make a video on this. I think it's important. My mother said this while she was in the kitchen, and I remember this. She said that si le pongo ponzoña y le huele, si le huele del estómago, si le huele, she goes like this and this, si huele y huele del estómago y se van. She said that the roaches, the reason that the stuff smells the way that it did is because they smell through their stomach, and the certain type of smell that this chemical is used is because that's why it gets rid of all of them. And that's what she said. But she said it very comfortably when she was pretty comfortably in the kitchen. She's kind of moving and doing this, and she goes, "Sí, le pongo un ponzón ahí, huelen del estómago y sí, que se va, que se va." I have to keep going and do it, and she's like, washing dishes or getting some other cabinets or something like that. So I think it's important for me to talk about, because my mother's relating these cockroaches to the dead little girl. It's not any good. So this is very disturbing to me. This is very disturbing to me. So y'all can make whatever y'all want. This is why I don't know the fact that you have to practice that language, how it affects a human being. I don't know how it affects a human being on how they make decisions in life. Obviously, you have to take ownership, and there's nothing that you can do to some degree. But the idea of it is I don't know if you practice saying, use that as a metaphor. Use that as a hypothetical metaphor for yourself so that you feel good. This is how you get rid of the problem, mentally and emotionally. And so she's practiced this because the circumstances are really tough. But I was over 10 years old when somewhere around about 10 years old, and then it's when it started. She started to use this chemical. So there's a speculation, either my mother poisoned herself, she knew somebody poisoned, because look, one of the things that I think is important for me to think about, for those that are investigating this, or who gives a shit, is, okay, did my mother ever explain to you that I was poisoned along with her with Licha, my dad's sister? My dad's sister, Licha, and I talked about Frankie got raped. If I've talked to Frankie over the phone, unless it was a computerized voice and it wasn't him, he's going to tell you he got raped and if we get oral sex. But he knows who that guy was, and he knows who Licha was. Licha is the one responsible for stealing my grandpa's money, who was a World War I veteran. The whole family hated her. Richard Palomo could tell you that story. Richard Palomo knew all about it, and so did, I don't know what it was. I don't think Licha was a lesbian. She could have been. Licha could have been a lesbian. Maybe she wasn't. I don't think she was a transgender. Could have. I don't know. It was so long ago. And I don't think she was. I don't think Licha was a transgender. She could have been a lesbian. I think my mother's saying maybe she was a lesbian. I think she was a lesbian because I don't think she was ever married to. I don't remember, no. But then my mother, besides Frankie was not there when I got poisoned. Whenever we went to Leach's house and I ate that soup and I all of a sudden started throwing up and got sick, Frankie was nowhere in the living room and nowhere in the kitchen or even got a bowl for himself that I could recall, ever. So it was just me, my mother, and Licha. And so I want to talk about this because my mother should have told you that she herself, of all the circumstances, whoever identified about what was going on, if my mom told you Frankie was there or Frankie said he was there, he happened to just walk by in the living room, I don't remember him being there at all until after I got fucking poisoned or long before she served that meal to me. 30 an hour before that. I don't remember, or we went back to the house. But my mother should have told you this, that she was poisoned along with me, together. She got a spoon, and she tried it, and she got scared, and she said, my stomach. And she looked over at Leisha like, see, I hope this is, because she saw me throwing up. I went like this, and I started, and I was eating the soup, and my mom got scared. She said, here, yeah, let me try. And I talked about this lady was frantically trying to make a poison. It was the craziest shit you could ever imagine. This lady was so frantic and trying to poison me and trying to come up with a stew of poison was fucking crazy. My mother was frantically trying to protect us, like she was trying to conversate and protect us and trying to calm this lady down, but she wouldn't. She was like in a retaliation after my mother's throat, like real bad. And she was responsible for leading this guy to also rape Frankie. Anyway, and I talked about that she locked herself in her room and she opened and closed the cabinet and she says, stay away from this room. You know, and that's what she said. And I talked about this whole story and drew the drawings, but I want to say something very important. My mother should have told you that she tried the soup that I drank and she grabbed her stomach and she looked and she said she tried, and it was poison. If my mother never told you that, how do you know my mother didn't tell you she drank poison to kill her own daughter? Depression, someone raped her. I don't know how she met my biological father. But that's his kid, to my understanding. Unless it's someone else, I don't know. But I think, no, that is my biological sister. Who's to say that my biological father didn't rape my mother from the very beginning? Who's to say that? Who's to say my biological father didn't rape my mother in the beginning? And it just happened to be that my mother came over and I offered him a beer. I don't think my mother would have done that. But I don't know how desperate someone is without an education and is a prostitute and you're already with an old man that you want to have some sort of affection from an older man. And so you call this guy and then she, when I'm about 4 years old when this happens, and he comes over and my mom did conversate with him and came over and I remember my mom holding, and they drank like a couple sips off her beer and then they went to go have sex. And I talked about they were making like really rough sex. And I could hear, I thought he was killing my mother. I don't know what the fuck was going on. And I got scared, walked outside and opened the door. And then the commotion stopped and my mom was like, oh no, the baby, the kid. So they stopped doing what they were doing. They walked over to us. Maybe that's why my biological father then looked over at me and then looked at my mother kind of upset, like, because he couldn't finish. He's like, damn, Anyway, but I just know this is what's going on, okay? My mother was poisoned. How is it that my mother maybe didn't do this to herself? Because she don't want you to know. How do you know that my mother, what is the details to it? My mother should have told you that I was poisoned along with her. If not, then all I know is that my mother is saying that about the cockroach poison. That's what she told me. So I wanted to make a video about that. You can make whatever you want, but I think it's worthy of me talking about it because this is why. This is very disturbing. It means that she doesn't care as much about her kid as people think that she does. And I think she disregards. As soon as a kid stays over there, and she sees a little girl get hit, and she can't do anything, and they're just making money off of her, and then they start raping my mother. The horrific conditions are so bad that she then has to throw the kid away, and that's the way that she does it. Because I remember her getting a business card. I was there when she got that business card. No bullshit. She asked the ladies that used to live there, Michelle, and her mother and father. They were moving out. She asked for a business card, and I was there in the front yard. And I told my mother, "You don't know any friends. What are you talking about, Mom? You don't have any friends. Who do you know, Mom? Who do you know?" And she, "No, cállate, güey, tú no sabes nada, cabrón." And that's what she said. A very soft way, kind of like I was her friend. But I remember her, and I drew the drawings of this, and I was 4 years old. This is before or after Michael Jackson. Yeah, I think it was before Michael Jackson. Could have been right after. Yeah, it could have been right after. The way you can tell if it was before or right after Michael Jackson is if you look up the medical records when my father had a heart attack, because I had to go to Michelle's house, and if you can figure out what year and date that was, and then you can time it that way. But anyway, I thought I'd talk about this because this is more disturbing. She doesn't care about her daughter. She just get the roaches away. So this is very disturbing, because now if you ever have a burial, you're gonna have to force her, and then you tell her to be conditioned you're gonna use identical twin to poison it even more. I don't even know how to fix this, because if my mother's doing this, I'm there to watch all the behavior. And so now they want to make a make-believe story, because this is about Sarah and Ken and Kenneth. This is all this is about, in that family, cherishing their white skin and non-retards or whatever. This is all this is about. They know they were eventually going to throw that dead body on. They knew that's what the plan was. They were going to throw that worthless dead body as a weapon, because it's valued in so much of God. And then you build a church because it's so valued in God's eyes, and you didn't see it like the way we saw it, and we're fixing. Well, it makes sense now, because my mother didn't really give a shit. And I think she did, but that's not the truth. But because I heard my mother cringe. It's very disturbing of this. The president's response to this motherfucking goddamn president is doing this goddamn shit. I really don't know how to. I don't know how, have any earthly idea to even a fraction of a hair to think how they're going to try to get my mother, because that's what she was talking about. Why would you point to your hijos? Sí, huelen del estómago, se huele, y se van. And she did that. I swear to you, she was the one that told me that. She said they smell through their stomach, and the smell causes them to leave. It's not a poison. Like a poison that they eat. To my understanding, it wasn't a poison that they eat. It was a smell that makes them go away. So as far as anything goes with this particular type of situation, I thought it was important for me to talk about. My mother's relating the roach poison and the roaches to that little girl. I never thought about that up until I've shared this cockroach poison that smelled like broccolis, but I didn't know that this was my sister. That's why I didn't bring that up and match those two, because I didn't know. And now they're sabotaging me, saying I did know. Oh yes, sir, you already knew. That isn't correct. No, And this is how Ken and Sara, what they were doing. That's and it's their platoon that were doing this. Even they heard me, even these three of them that were in here, they heard me, and they kind of shit, the mother's, she doesn't even give a fuck about the babies as much. You're just shitting roaches out of your ass. Even whenever all three of them did, they kind of kept their head down and they're like, hey, your mom's fucking ruthless. That's why your twin is being disgusting toward me. So hopefully I shared this information with you. You're going to have to dissect it. If there is going to be a proper burial, ever, I know they're gonna do whatever it is what they want to do and make believe the whole shit. This is for them and this is for Matt. The time's gone. They just want emotional exchange credit. That's all it fucking is. They shitted on it. They worthless dead corpse. That's exactly what they're gonna do. Is to give it to Ivan, then give it to Frankie, exchange it. I get the money. I have my own kids over here. Fuck you. So it doesn't change the fact that that's my flesh and blood direct, and then it all falls on me. Now they want to exchange this dead corpse. That's exactly what they're doing. That's exactly what they're doing. This girl's been dead for, I'm 41 years old, 28 years. This girl died whenever I was like 13 years old. Yeah, I was like 13 years old when this little girl died. Maybe 13 to 14. She was 18 months older than me because she had been 15 years old. She could have been 15 years old. I thought she was 14. Maybe the youngest 13, but I thought she was about 14 years old. So she could have been maybe 15, early 15. I don't even know. I have no idea, but I just know her name is either Miranda or Marissa. And Miranda or Marissa, and as far as it goes with, you know, how old she was, and I remember it being dark. We already had the brand new car. We had just gotten this brand new car, no more than a year, I'm gonna say, and we got that car when I was 12 or early 13 years old. So I was about late 13 years old when I think this little girl died, or early 14. Because if I was 14 years old at all, that little girl, she had to have been 15. At least 15 years old, because I remember very distinctively doing the math in front of Ivan, because I was wanted to see when she was born, and I counted the months, and it was somewhere around 15 to 18 months older than me. I want to say I counted 18 months. That's what I want to say. I counted 18 months, maybe 15 months, either or between the numbers, either 15 or 18, but she was 15 to 18 months older than me. That's what I remember. So, if she's 15, that's more than a year. So if I was 14, she had to be 15. But I'm going to say I was like late 13 years old, because I was 13 years old when I was in 7th grade. And in 7th grade, I turned 14. But I want to say I was maybe late 13 years old. I was somewhere around late 13 years old. So that's what I have to say about that. People can do what they want, say what they want. You know, I just know that they're just brutally stabbing me with that. That's what they're brutally stabbing with that. And I don't like this at all. I do not like this at all. And they're doing it on purpose. They were doing it at the grocery store. I don't like this at all. Because it's just waiting for the cemetery for someone to resurrect demonic curses against me for the Jesus Christ movement for Kenneth and Madison. Oh, they're not nothing to do with it. Oh, Kenneth's dead. Oh, but Sarah Cooper's old now. If you're sorry, fuck you. Oh, President Barack Obama, the World Trade Center collapsed. Osama bin Laden had to get murdered. Wheel down Osama bin Laden and my sister together. Barack Obama is the president. He has to do political power. You don't understand until I give you that understanding. Oh, it's just, you know, oh, but you fault over here, then fault over there. I don't like this at all, because this never changes that this is my dead sister. It doesn't change that she's my direct blood, mother and father. It doesn't change the fact that I'm watching this little girl cursing me in front of the house, wearing a princess crown, walking back and forth, shitting and pissing herself, trying to fucking walk. I'm not even allowed to approach her because Ken Cooper's detective charged at me in front of my mother. That was the only restaurant I got to go, and that's when Ken Cooper's lookalike was there and charged at me. Both David and my mother saw this happen and looked at this guy like, what the fuck, who the fuck do you think you're charging at? I was looking at my own sister in front of me with a mouth full of potato sauce and pizza sauce and just doing this. I just want to survive. Trying to feed herself. But you're going to get a Ken Cooper detective story because he deals with detective murders in real life. He incarcerates people. That's why his son gets a brand new job over at the radio station because of Michael Jackson. That's why he gives a gun to Mike. You know, you're talking about Sarah Cooper and the forgiveness and power of Jesus Christ story because they built a church for that shit. Oh, I mean, look, this is, you know, the arguments and the bitterness, it all falls on me, but because that's what they set it up for, but I don't like this at all. I don't like this at all. I know my mother was talking about that. And it's because she's thinking that her reproductive system is just like prostitution. That's what she's doing, because that's why the twins, I don't know where Marco's twin came from. I don't know who his biological father is. I don't think it's Lucio. It could be. If it's Lucio, he was raped, you know. This motherfucker. Look, let me tell you something. Gay men would only most likely have the probability of doing something like that with my mother. The only reason a straight guy would snatch a baby from a mother like that is if he's waiting for the money, or he's gay and he's trying to take the child away. Why would a straight man doesn't do that? If he does, it's only for money. Straight men will not do. There's something very dark about that. Straight men do not do that. A gay man will do it because, oh, it's just, you know, they don't understand straight men thinking. They don't understand the arousals and sex we have toward heterosexual women. They don't understand that. And they just try to think they understand, and they take those actions, and that's not how it works. So he's from Mexico. If he stole the child, why would you separate an identical twin? Not just a child. Like when the kid grows up and you take the baby to a safe haven. No, she knows it's an identical twin. He knows it's an identical twin. He walks right past my biological, he walks right past my father, Raymond Palomo. Me, Frankie, and my dad. As we're walking down the hospital hall to go to the room. And I think it's important for me to talk about, because where does this child come from? My mother is an ex-prostitute. She's at this point also, counting money to be raped at the neighbor's house, and she was being raped. I don't know who else, because there was a couple of times that I saw her counting money, and she was flushing that she had just had sex coming from the side of the house. And I remember one time she had money in her, she looked like she had just had sex, somebody gave me the stimulation, and she was counting money in her hands right in front of me as she was walking pretty fast. And yeah, I got money. And I remember she had like a smile, kind of like stimulated and counting money. And I said, "What are you doing?" No, that. And she was just quickly going about her business. And I said, "What are you doing over there?" Another note, the day that my mother told me that I don't know if that was Ivan's biological father, and it could have been, he raped my mother. Because my mother came home, she said she couldn't use her room, she couldn't use the bathroom because she kept on talking about and saying, "I don't like that guy, I don't like him, she kept on saying that she didn't want nothing. I talked about this already. He charged that my mother trying to 100%, he was looking to mate with her, rape her, and he eventually did. I don't know who it was that when she was counting this money, if it was David or it was someone else hiding in the house, and then raped my mother. So I don't know who, that's still a mystery to me. But my mother's doing this as a prostitution. So when my mother starts going to work, when my mother works at Stanley Tools, what happens there? This is why the prostitution kept on leading. But anyway, I don't know if she ever did prostitution to be able to tell you. Lucio showed up at her job site, and that was when I was 9 years old. He's stalking my mother for a long time. My dad told me this. My dad was in binoculars. I talked about he used to drive me to, and my dad was drooling from the fucking mouth one day. He was just sitting at home waiting on the couch, waiting for my fucking mother. He was drooling. He wasn't drunk. He wasn't drunk at all. He wasn't drinking. He was drooling from his fucking mouth. He was so mad. And he was like, yo te miré, ¿quién era ese cabrón que yo te miré saliendo de la van? And he talked about a van that my mother was coming out of. Like a van, and it was my father described this guy, and it described Lucio, that he had a beard, mustache, and a goatee, and he was fairly tall, or fairly about his size. So I think it's important for me to talk about, because I don't know really what else to make of this, but all I know is that if this information, you can take notes down, you get more information, because my mother is using her reproductive like a rape system, and this is why I was so protective of her. People thought I was an enemy. People thought I was trying to sell my mother for sex to Robert, and I wasn't. In fact, I don't know if it was her, but it was because I was hanging around Robert, and then he called my mother, and I never influenced my mother. Oh yeah, let's come Robert. I was like, oh, let's come Robert? And I was like, oh, okay, well, you don't want to. But I never put pressure on her to try to hook up with Robert Zarati's father. And I never put that pressure. I never put pressure on her to hook up with anybody. I just know that when she liked the guy when I went to rehab one day when I was 16 years old, and she seemed interested, but the guy was gay, my mother looked very lonely, and looks like she wanted somebody in her life. And all I did very nice, because I was a pretty handsome looking kid at 16. I walked over to the guy, and I don't know how I did it, or it was just me and my mom were in the hallway, and everyone's leaving after class, and there's no one in the hallway very much when it was already empty. And I go, yeah, this is my mother. This is my mother. I just wanted to introduce you. She always comes here, and I don't know what I said, but it wasn't nervous or anything. It just introduced my mother. I was like, oh, this is my mother. And I was just like, I'm a good kid, it's my mother. And I didn't put pressure, and the guy looked at my mother and said, he was gay. He told my mother straight up, no, I'm not interested. This guy's gay. So, and I remember my mother, how she felt like she been let down by a guy. And I remember driving home in the Dodge Intrepid, and I felt bad for my mother a little bit, but I felt glad a little bit for my mother, because at least it was saying that there was hope for her to find a person in her life. So, all this is a tragedy. I'm 41 years old. My mother's, 61, in her early 60s. She's talking about her, and I talked about, this is very disturbing though, about this little girl. She doesn't, I don't know how, this is nothing but, this even enriches the bacon. This enriches the value and how they can throw this traumatizing shit on me. This is all that this does, what I'm telling you. The fact that she's relating this roaches to, and saying that the roaches through their stomach, she points at her stomach. And she goes, sí, que huelen, que se van. And she did this with her body language. And she goes, sí, sí, que se van. I don't know what to say. I'm not the professional, but I thought I would share this. This is why Ken and Sara did have to get involved and did make the right moves.